The party defeats the big bad with much rejoicing and heads to the back room where the jewels and other loot lay about in all their shiny glory. Most intriguing, however, is the large chest towards the back which holds the potential for great wealth. The rogue makes a run for it, eager to be the first to sample whatever magical treasures the chest holds. But surprise, the chest comes alive and bites their face off.
Tonight, we dive into the lovable, horrible, face-biting monsters known as mimics.
That's how we roll. 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 That's how we roll.
Welcome to the Goblins Corner. My name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
And tonight,
We're talking about mimics.
that's right, your favorite face-biting monsters that stick to you, eat you alive while dressed as delightful treasure chests.
As the case may be.
We're going to discuss how to optimize your mimic, turn them into other things aside from chests,
There's so many options.
give it a little bit of lore,
Yeah.
maybe even some possible delightful demonic upgrades.
How can you not love upgrades? That's what we're here for. You
Yes.
got to make everything better/worse.
And of course, lots more flavor.
Yes.
So if you haven't yet, hit that like and subscribe button. Help us get our show out to more people and get notified when more amazing episodes come your way.
And hey, if you're listening to the show, give us a review on iTunes or Podchaser.
Where your laptop or listening device will slowly shapeshift and bite off your face.
Ooh, earbuds that are mimics. That's not good.
That's going to suck, folks. Let
no,
me
that's
tell
going
you.
to bite.
Good point. Yes, it will suck and bite. So, Matt, why are we talking about mimics this evening?
Firstly, they are iconic creatures from both D&D and Pathfinder.
Oh, yeah. They're definitely distinct. You know a mimic when you see a mimic.
Or you don't until it's too late.
Fair play. They're surprising, they're sneaky, and they're definitely fun to throw at characters.
You got to love any creature that you can use to ratchet up the paranoia in a game.
And paranoia indeed will happen when you start throwing mimics into a campaign.
Yes.
And finally, what, Matt?
They have powerful, fun abilities that aren't often utilized to their fullest extent.
And we will utilize them to the fullest extent this evening.
Indeed.
So let's dive into some mimics. First off, let's just do a quick definition, which we gathered on the various wikis.
All right.
We've done our due diligent research here. What is a mimic, Matt?
A mimic is a fictional amorphous monster with the ability to change its shape and surprise and eat people.
Yes. At its base, it is a monster that turns into an object that turns back into a monster to eat you.
Yes.
That's it.
They tend to favor inanimate objects and often pose as chests, doors, or even piles of treasure in their quest for food.
Grows some teeth and some tentacles, bites off your face.
Sure.
Now, most general descriptions will show a mimic as some sort of object that's half changed.
Sure.
So you'll see like a treasure chest with big teeth, as I mentioned.
And I mean, that makes sense, right? Because if it was just a picture of a treasure chest, that...
Everyone's like, cool, that's a treasure chest.
yeah,
It's not very
whoop-de-doo.
scary.
Yeah.
But a treasure chest with a tongue,
Yes.
that's a lot different, right? Ed Greenwood also added some additional lore which describes the mimic's hide, and he describes it as naturally gray in hue with a smooth, very hard outer skin that appears stone-like. And I find it interesting that it's gray, because doppelgangers are also naturally gray, kind of hard skin.
That's true.
Maybe there's something going on with that, folks.
Could be. What if they're doppelganger pets?
Doppelganger pets would be great.
Oh, no, they're actually intelligent.
Yes. Well, I mean, so are
Maybe they're
intellect.
neighbors.
I mean, illithids have intellect devours, and they're intelligent too.
Fair.
In their amorphous form, the mimic is covered in tiny eye spots, which are especially sensitive to light, heat, and vibration.
It's good to know.
It's going to find you. It's going to eat you.
Yep.
What else is going on with the mimic, Matt?
A mimic is heavy.
Yes.
Like far heavier than you would expect for its size.
How heavy is a mimic?
Well, it occupies a volume of roughly 15 cubic feet. It has a weight of 4,500 pounds. That's 2,000 kilograms for
Everybody else, aside from people in the U.S.?
Yes.
Otherwise known as 2.25 tons.
Yes.
That's a heavy-ass mimic.
He's a big boy.
Go drop on you, you're going to be dead.
Yeah.
Just something to think about, folks. By the way, it should be noted that they can look like any inanimate object that they can fit the size.
So a stone trap,
Yes.
which drops and then grows pseudopods and start eating people.
I was actually thinking the bottom of the trap, like these spikes, and then the pseudopods. So you fall down a trap. You get impaled on the spikes. The spikes now turn into pseudopod and begin to devour you.
Sure.
That is 100% could happen if you had a mimic played correctly.
Yes.
We utilize this a lot in terms of behavior and tactics, which we're going to get to in a few minutes.
Because they're smart.
Yes. We'll also talk about the various other species of mimic. Did you know that there are other types of mimics, Matt?
I did.
That's because you did this research with me.
That's true.
But other people may not have.
And that's what we're here for.
Yeah. So let's dig into some of the lore, Matt.
They first appeared in the 1977 Monster Manual from Gary Gygax.
Right.
In that book, it describes a mimic as a subterranean creature which cannot stand the light of the sun.
Ooh.
They are able to perfectly mimic stone or wood. This is often why they prefer underground areas and dungeons specifically.
Absolutely. A mimic travels by extending strong pseudopods, which exude a sticky glue, and then pulls itself along. So very much like an amoeba or something like that.
Yeah.
This allows it to travel on walls, floors, and ceilings with the same speed. Although later editions, I believe, neglected the climbing abilities of the mimic. I would definitely keep that in.
Put it back.
Put it back in, folks. Not only that, in terms of their skin and stuff like that, they were capable of altering the pigmentation and texture of their skins by pumping a brown, pigmented fluid from some sort of like internal muscular organ.
Mm-hmm.
And it put it through the surface capillary vessels. This is a la Ed Greenwood. In
Okay,
his
sure.
Very detailed description of how a mimic works. While the pigment granted them the appearance of wood, the capillaries themselves granted an appearance of wood grain. This fluid could be more readily seen in wounded mimics. That's why a lot of pictures of colored mimics had like this brownish ichor dripping from them.
Interesting.
I thought that was a great bit of lore.
Yeah. I would have normally assumed that they just had chromatophores, like cuttlefish.
That would probably have been a lot easier. I'm guessing at the time the
They
lore
probably
was written.
didn't know about chromatophores.
That's right.
Huh, interesting.
Back in the day, my friends.
Yep. Most sages believed, depending on the version, that they were created by wizards to serve as protectors against treasure hunters.
Mm-hmm.
Some also suggested they were creatures of the far realm.
I personally love the idea that these are weird-ass creatures from the far realm.
I like both ideas. I like the idea that a wizard
Was from the far realm?
created them
Maybe
and
found
released
them?
them into the world.
You can see this crazy-ass wizard. He's just losing his mind to madness, and he sees a treasure chest in the far realm,
Yeah.
and he drags it back because it looks like loot.
Yeah.
And then it grows tentacles and tries to eat him, and he's a powerful wizard.
Yeah, he just teleports away.
He teleports away, looks at it, goes, I'm going to breed that thing.
I need one. I need a lot of
I gotta
these.
have 3 or 4 of these things. This will be great in my lair.
Maybe I can train it to be luggage.
Yeah, absolutely. Some interesting lore about mimics. They're not known to have a culture, but large mimics often group together into collectives. So, folks, make that culture happen.
Yeah.
If they can gather into collectives, and interestingly enough, we'll get to like the types and stuff, but a lot of times a collective of mimics share telepathy.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to have some sort of society.
Mimics also reproduce by splitting into 2 tiny mimics and then growing. I disagree with that. It is what is written. They're 4,500 pounds.
So that's not 2 tiny mimics.
That is not 2 tiny mimics.
That's
That's
two
that's still 2
large-sized
giant
mimics.
things. So for me, I like to think that a mimic reaches a certain size and then literally drops into hundreds of tiny mimics.
Oh, that's badass. Just splits like cockroaches when the light comes on?
Yeah. I like that idea better because 2 mimics doesn't make sense.
And they're tiny little treasure chests, like about this big. They're tiny little bags
Mm-hmm.
filled
Like
with
coin
gold.
bags.
Coin bags filled with gold. Maybe that's what here's a lore idea, folks. Maybe the bag of devouring is actually a larval mimic that can't change its form.
Could be. Or it could be it leads to the god of mimics.
The Great Eater.
Yeah.
That would be
The
kind of cool.
ravenous one.
I'm down with all of those. Mostly, mimics have remained essentially the same throughout all of the versions of D&D and Pathfinder.
Yeah. It's not broke.
But there have been several different types.
Starting off, obviously, you've got the standard mimic.
And for its type, it's relatively smallish, right? It's intelligent, it can speak, and it can be reasoned with for the most part.
Right.
You know, they're not going to be doing quadratic equations or anything like that, but they'll definitely maybe speak to you in Undercommon.
Sure.
We also have killer mimics. What are those, Matt?
They are way larger mimics that do not speak and just attack and consume.
And when I say way larger, like think room size, or maybe even 4 or 5 chest large.
Sure.
That's pretty badass.
Maybe that's the point right before they split up.
Oh, they're
just
uncontrolled and just hungry?
Yeah.
Yeah. A couple other interesting mimics, 2 of which are from Dragon Magazine. This one's from Dragon Magazine 101, a metal mimic.
Okay.
It's just like a regular style mimic. It can take the shape of, any of the various stone and wood, but it can also take the shape and abilities of any raw or finished metal item in addition to the stone or wood.
Nice.
Could look like a metal statue.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, a support beam. That would be really awesome.
That would be cool.
A throne, for example, or
a
metal
hammer,
hammer,
like a big 2-handed weapon.
Sure, that would be awesome. Or maybe even a metal door. No, the grated bars for a prison.
Yep, a portcullis.
A portcullis. That's what's up. Yes. This also, by the way, includes the color, luster, texture of any pure metal, such as iron, gold, silver, or platinum, except for adamantine, and it cannot form into any alloy.
Sure.
So it could be a big pile of treasure coins.
Yeah, what's not to love?
Yeah. What else can a metal mimic do, Matt?
They can also create, oddly enough, a magical illumination from itself or from a nearby object.
This allows it to be a big pile of metal coins, maybe with a magic item that's glowing softly.
Yeah. Or if it's doing the metal coin trap, right? Just a spot of light off to the side so that the light glints off of the giant pile of coins.
Yeah, absolutely. And finally, they can also, to kind of beef up the image, they can exude a pseudopod and turn it into the form of like a sword or a dagger. And these extremities can often look like an enchanted blade.
Sure. Got to lure them in for the loot.
I mean, this is perfect.
Yeah. You can use this as is. There's nothing wrong with it.
I would actually have the mimic be a door with a metal handle. Or maybe some kind, here's another one, like a torture throne, like a torture chair. And maybe as soon as you strap it in, the mimic begins to consume you.
Sure. I don't see why not.
A trap. Like a bladed trap.
An Indiana Jones pedestal with like the golden idol sitting on the top.
The golden
of it.
idol is the pseudopod that reaches out and grabs your face. Sure. All kinds of options, folks. We've also got what, Matt?
House Hunters.
Yeah, not the TV series, but from before.
Right. And that's from Dragon Magazine 19.
All right. What's up with House Hunters?
House Hunters are enormous mimics that can form entire houses or villages.
Village of the Hungry?
Yes.
Man, when everything's literally a mimic?
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting with those is they cannot, at least in this one, I don't think they can cast illusions. But there's nothing to say that you couldn't put that in your game.
There's really no reason for them to. If you're in something the size of a city mimic, you're pretty much out of luck.
Yeah. There's also the Greater Mimic in 2nd edition. I believe it was from the Undermountain Adventure. And they can cover a 30 by 30 room. And they are intelligent. And they can make illusions of creatures inside the room.
Gotta love that.
That is an awesome trap. The monster is the trap. And you're already inside him.
Yeah. Or you're walking through a dungeon and you look through a door. And there's a princess chained to a chair or anything. The princess is an illusion.
Yeah, the princess is, or the princess is the tongue that's tasting you.
Sure.
Could be all kinds of fun. In addition to your standard mimic, you also have what, Matt?
The space mimic.
The space mimic. You heard it correctly.
From Spelljammer.
Yes. And they can look like just the blackness of space.
I mean, that makes sense. If you don't
just
see
a dark
it,
patch.
Yeah, it's just a dark patch against a bunch of darkness.
Until it hits the ship and starts to devour you. Can also look like space debris, so anything from like a comet to a meteorite or even just some flotsam from maybe like another ship.
Yeah.
That would be awesome is maybe
make it look like salvage.
Maybe there's an entire ship of salvage, but it's a colony of mimics. That would be awful.
Yes and no. Depends on whether or not you're the one running it.
Yeah, if you're the DM, it's going to be awesome.
You got to love it.
Yeah, it's hilarious. And finally, you've got tiny little mimics called book mimics. What are those?
Book mimics were bred by the Church of Ogma to envelop a book and protect it from moisture, flame, and damage. They took a small amount of blood from readers if no food was present, and were as intelligent as a typical humanoid.
So I'm picturing this scholastic wizard from the Church of Ogma, just kind of chilling. He's got his sandwich. He's listening to some bard playing downstairs. He takes a bite of his sandwich. He writes something down in his book, hands it over to his mimic. It takes a bite of a sandwich.
Sure.
It writes something down in its book.
Yeah.
You've got a study pal.
Absolutely. I also like the idea of, like, if you don't know, you're sitting there reading a book and you get a paper cut.
Oh, yeah.
Because the poor thing's starving.
You haven't fed me in a few days.
Exactly. Like, oh, sorry about that. Here you go, little buddy.
Yeah. And, put that guy on a bookshelf.
That's what the Necronomicon was.
Oh, very good. That's why Ash got his fingers bit.
That's right.
I love that. Let's talk a little bit about some mimic stats.
Okay. They often depend on which version of which game you're playing, but most common across the games are the fact that they can shape change, right? Mimics can look like anything that's roughly their volume.
Yep. All of them generally had dark vision, roughly 60 to 90 feet.
Right.
And that depended on the game and the version that you had it from.
They also generally have adhesive, which you could dissolve by a strong alcohol or the death of the mimic.
Yep. They could grapple with their pseudopods, and they, of course, had a nasty, nasty bite.
Yes. I like the idea that they can use the adhesive and the grappling pseudopods to brachiate throughout dungeons and stuff like that, and just kind of pitfall their way around.
You know those sticky hands, the
Yes.
kids' toys?
Yeah.
I kind of see them as just going to and just sliding along. A lot of fun with that. Other powers were dependent upon the subspecies, but often included stuff like intelligence.
Yes.
So mimics had their own language.
Yeah. And also oftentimes spoke Undercommon,
Yes. Telepathy was another one.
which you have to love.
And acid immunity and immunity to being prone, because it's amorphous.
Right.
But the acid immunity, that's great.
It's useful. Yeah.
Very useful. Also of note, the skin of mimics could be used as an ingredient for making polymorph self potions,
That makes perfect sense.
because it can change.
Sure. And as people probably know, we're big fans of creature harvesting anyway, so absolutely add that to your game.
In addition to that, the adhesive secretions could also be sold to alchemists, and their internal organs could be used in the production of perfumes or as food. What does a mimic taste like?
I think it's like a bear, right? Like whatever it's been eating is
What
what
is
it tastes like.
Okay, I'll agree with that. I was about to ask you what a bear tastes like, but now I know.
Yeah, they because their fat layers are directly created from what they've been eating the most of.
So the mimics taste like adventurers.
Yes.
Okay, that
Long
makes
pick.
sense. Subcultures considered mimic organs tasty delicacies.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, and mimic blood was a valuable substance often used in the creation of golems.
Now that is interesting,
What
but
kind-
it's an inanimate thing that becomes animate, much like mimics. I can see the crossover there.
Yeah, again, going back to creature harvesting, this makes perfect sense. Use this lore in your game as you see fit.
That poses more questions than answers with mimics and creature harvesting. Like literally every bit of them's useful. What do you use most?
Yeah, all of the mimic is used. It's great.
Yeah.
Right. Speaking of questions and answers, we've got what, Matt?
You got the question of the week.
All right. Is it mimic related this evening?
It is, in fact.
Tell it to me.
All right. If you were a mimic, what form would you take to devour others and why?
That's a good question. I would take the form of a love seat. A
Oh.
comfy love seat.
Sure.
Maybe or a plush couch. Maybe even a recliner. Something that you sleep in.
Something you nod off in and then it's too late.
Yes. That would be a lot of fun. Now, if I couldn't turn into something fabric related or something like that, I would probably do a walk-in shower.
I feel like in today's world, the most efficient thing you could be is probably a cell phone,
So you'd be a tiny mimic.
but it's always going to be handy. And if somebody sees one sitting there, the first thing they're going to do is pick it up, either if they're a nice person to find out who it belongs to,
Mm-hmm.
or if they're a criminal to steal it. You know, like seeing an unattended cell phone is almost always going to get the cell phone picked up.
You could also turn it into a porch, like a wooden porch, if you could just make wood and stone.
Oh, that's true. I didn't think about that.
How about a park bench?
That's where I was going.
The
A
comfiest
gazebo.
park bench that you're going to sleep on.
I was thinking, like, take the oldest D&D meme, which is I attack the gazebo, and just go ahead
Literally, the gazebo is the mimic.
and be a gazebo mimic.
I love that. That's kind of fun. A covered bridge would also be hilarious if you're a giant mimic.
Oh, yeah, that would be great. Just
Just chomp down all kinds of fun answers to this. We, of course, love the answers that you submit to us. So if you have any for the question of the week, hit us up at Gobbler's Corner on Twitter and Mastodon and the various other social media dumpster fires that exist in this world.
You can also just type it down below if you're watching on YouTube.
Yeah, just give us a comment.
Yep.
We like that too. So we're talking about mimics. We've given you a little bit of the stats behind the mimic and some of the lore of their creation. Not a whole lot, right?
No.
But they've got some really interesting things about them. And one of the things I find really interesting about a mimic is their behavior and their tactics. Talk to me a little bit about how they behave, Matt.
At the most baseline, mimics are ambush predators, right? They lie in wait for creatures looking like treasure or statues or whatever, and then lash out with their pseudopods and try and eat people.
Pretty simple, right?
Yeah.
However, there are a couple of things that stand out. Many mimics, for example, are intelligent, which means, yes, they're ambush predators, but they can plan. And this is where DM creativity comes into play.
Yes.
So we mentioned a whole bunch of different mimics earlier, right?
Right.
The mimic gazebo, the mimic covered bridge. Like, seriously, if even without other materials like a metal mimic or a book mimic,
Right.
if they can become anything that's wood or stone, here's some fun examples that I've come up with and you added to as well. First off, a large trash can in a city.
Yeah.
There's always one around,
Yep.
and not many people pay attention to them.
Nope.
Be real easy to just lash out, grab a small animal or a person and
Chuck it inside. And
yeah, slowly digest it.
for that matter, anything like an open wooden box or crate.
Near the dock,
Yep.
where the dock worker walks around to have a cigarette, all of a sudden never comes back.
Yeah. And that's whether or not it's a loading dock at, a truck terminal or like an actual dock.
Mm-hmm. They could become a stone wall in an alley.
Yeah. They're just the wall.
A door. We mentioned doors. Doors are fun. Door mimics are great because you reach out to grab the mimic and it reaches out to grab you.
you back.
Yeah.
Fancy bar tables or chairs.
Yeah, have a seat.
Yeah.
Right on its mouth. The floor of an inn. Hotel California there.
Absolutely.
But you can never leave.
A boat or a cart.
Oh, very nice. You really want to up the danger game for that. The players get on, they just see this boat. Maybe like a rowboat, right? On the
Mhm.
dock. It's abandoned. No one's getting in it. They're trying to make a quick escape. They dive into the rowboat. They start rowing away while the authorities are chasing after them, trying to summon another boat or something like that. And then the boat just starts to collapse around them into a big mouth. And now they got to swim.
Assuming they can get out of the boat.
And the paladin's not going to go anywhere. He's in full plate mail.
Absolutely.
He's a tasty victual being munched on currently.
Or he could drown.
He's definitely going to, he's going to drown first, and
Right.
then he's going to be eaten. So a lot of fun with that. Additionally, you could be a statue.
Sure. Now, you could find those in holy places. You could find them around towns.
Mm-hmm.
There's always room for a statue.
An outhouse.
I love that because I'm a terrible person.
And finally,
A trap.
which we mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
any trap.
Yeah, spike trap, stone trap, any kind of trap.
You know, that was it, the big ball trap that Indiana Jones was running after?
Yeah, that was a mimic.
Yeah. Imagine it's rolling along. It looks like stone, and then a whole bunch of mouths appear.
A big tongue goes lashing out.
Yeah. Thap, just kind of
That's exactly what I was thinking.
be awesome. Mimics are capable of planning and forethought. So DMs, if you're in a dungeon, ask yourself a couple of questions. First off, how are they getting food? They're hungry.
Yeah.
They want to eat.
Who are they allying with or talking to? Because if they're intelligent,
They're going to talk to people. Also, the big room ones that don't think.
right,
What do they know about the place they reside in?
there's no reason that they couldn't be, yes, they're a monster, but they could simply be a monstrous NPC.
I mean, they're going to be roaming through whatever dungeon or undercity that they're in anyway. They're going to have at least a map in their head of where to go or where the nearest kobolds are to eat.
Sure.
This makes them excellent NPCs in a city or in a dungeon. play that up.
Yeah. How do they bargain? Like if they're an NPC, generally they're just hungry, but they could be valuable allies because there's nothing that says they can't use objects or magic or anything else in their quest for food.
Sure. It may have magic items like rings or various, it could just sprout hands.
Yeah.
It could use a wand. If it's intelligent, and we'll talk about upgrading mimics in a second, it could do a whole lot more.
Absolutely.
Do they have a favorite snack? They're hungry, but maybe they like certain things.
If you're a dungeon mimic, but you really like horses, you don't get a lot of horses in the dungeon.
You can't turn into a stable.
Right.
So maybe you might want a little bit of horse meat.
Yeah.
Or maybe you have a sweet tooth. Maybe they like confections and candy bars and stuff.
Yeah, fresh baked pie.
How does this play into their behavior? Getting their favorite food. This might be something that smart PCs can maybe use to their advantage, right?
Absolutely.
Speaking of like personality and behavior, give them personality traits.
Quirks and stuff like that is also really fun. Give them goals. Like, okay, yes, they are hunger driven, but they're also intelligent.
Yes. Give them wants and needs and purpose.
Yes.
And finally,
give them a voice.
Yeah, what do they sound like? Are they gravelly? Do they talk like a pirate?
Are they brr?
Oh, yeah.
Right, because they're amorphous.
They could talk like anything.
I just had full ringmaster or talk show host, right? Just like, hi, everyone, I'm the Mimic. Zap Brannigan or something like that.
Yes. They could sound like anything, right?
I mean, if you have the ability to sound like anything, you might as well have a great voice.
They have that announcer voice, maybe a game show host.
Mm-hmm.
That would be awesome for a mimic. Now, mimics are rarely communal, but they do establish colonies, and we mentioned this earlier.
Mm-hmm.
They all communicate via telepathy. Think about this. How does this change the dynamic of a colony of mimics? If everyone knows everything, if a lone mimic goes trapezing off in the search for food and you kill it, do you have an entire city of mimics after you?
You might. What would the goal of a city of mimics have over one individual?
Could be anything. So, Matt, what makes mimics interesting? They are smart, they're sneaky.
And they're hungry.
Very, very hungry. If that weren't enough, we're going to talk about upgrading mimics.
Yes.
Because just being able to turn into stone and wood is cool. And we mentioned all the fun shapes you can become and the fact that they're intelligent. But let's say you want to kick it up a notch.
All right.
How can we upgrade a mimic?
Let's start with physical upgrades, right?
Okay. What's the first example?
You can always make them bigger.
Yeah.
Like huge. Or smaller.
Like a pin mimic? Like a tiny little pin that burrows into your body and begins to digest you?
Or that just follows along, takes a bite out of you, and takes off.
Oh, yeah.
It's just like the most irritating mimic ever.
Could allow them to change into other materials aside from wood and stone. We mentioned metal, of course, but here's some other fun examples. Crystal would be neat.
Mm-hmm.
You're walking in like the Underdark and there's all these glowing crystals and one of them just reaches out and bites your head off.
Sure.
Leather or fabric. So I mentioned the couch.
Yeah.
A couch mimic. A bed mimic.
A glass mimic.
Ooh, that would be fun.
Windows or a giant stained glass window, and you go up to look at it, and it just falls on you and envelops you.
The picture is the mimic in the stained glass window.
Nice. Sure.
That reaches a pseudopod out and slices off your face. You could let them change into creatures in addition to objects.
Yes.
You really want to increase the nastiness of a mimic? Have them change into monsters.
Yeah. Animals, what have you.
Yeah. A mimic as a bear is nasty. It's even nastier as a person.
I feel like that's moving a little bit into Ooblex territory.
Or, yeah, or doppelgangers.
Yeah.
But the possibility exists.
You can also make them adapt to their surroundings.
What do you mean by that?
A mimic in the Frostfell might look like a block of ice and exude cold, while one near a volcano might be closer to a magma elemental.
So one in the jungle could be a big-ass tree.
It could.
Or a tree stump.
Yep.
There's a perfect example, not even shifting too far to the left in terms of what a mimic could do. Because they could turn into wood or stone. You're just making it look like a living tree or even a tree stump.
Yeah.
That would be a lot of fun. You could finally upgrade their special attacks. And here's a couple fun examples. Poison or paralytic attacks.
Sure. Gotta love that.
A mimic with poison would be awesome. A mimic that paralyzes you would be even worse.
Agreed. You could give them multiple pseudopods.
Oh, yeah.
So multi-attack.
Just sprouts tentacle horrors to engulf you.
Absolutely.
Speaking of engulf, it could just engulf you.
And it should.
If it's one of the room size or house mimics, it is engulfing you.
Yeah, that should be built in. It's silly that it's not.
Now, those are just the physical qualities that you could upgrade in a mimic, but we can also do magic because they are monstrous creatures.
Yes.
The first thing, of course, which we generally say a lot, is make them casters.
Yep. Give them class levels. They're intelligent creatures.
Yes. Casters would be especially nasty because a mimic that casts spells is awful.
Yes.
A charm spell on a mimic? Come sit on me. I'm a very cushy chair.
A sorcerer mimic with a still spell with the ability to cast without doing any sort of components.
Yeah, or illusions would be great. They already have illusion attacks.
It's true.
Speaking of which, you could just upgrade the illusion abilities in mimicry.
Absolutely.
Maybe in addition to sight and smell or sight and sound, you could also have olfactory. Could have physical touch like demi-real illusions.
All of that could be a lot of fun. You could also dive into the far realm side of things and give them some psionic powers or maybe even memory altering.
That would be awesome for like a small mimic that bites chunks out of you.
It makes you forget every time it bites you.
You're walking down a hallway and you feel a bite. You look down, there's a chunk of, flesh missing from your leg. You're walking down a hallway and there's 2 chunks of flesh missing from your leg. You're walking down a hallway and you've got written on your hands, you are being eaten alive.
Yeah. Oh my God, Oh.
Next thing you know, your leg is gone.
Yeah.
There's a Doctor Who episode that's very similar to that.
Yes.
Without the leg biting, though.
Let them, we discussed this, use magical items. They're intelligent, and it makes them not only deadly, but it provides great loot for the parties. If you're going to look like a treasure chest,
Might as well have treasure.
might as well have some treasure. Yeah.
Yeah. Add to the, to the whole mimicry. And plus, if you've been killing adventurers, you're going to take their stuff.
Sure.
You're intelligent.
And you know that just makes the draw of people coming to take your loot that much more deadly, more realistic.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk a little bit about tactics. Of course, we mentioned wizards and stuff like that, but any character combat class would also be a lot of fun. A mimic with fighting abilities would be deadly.
Yes.
Grappler builds would especially be a lot of fun, and I highly recommend that.
Rogues. Sneak attack.
I mean, yeah, that's just built for that, right? Warlock, you mentioned. Great old one, mimic warlock.
Yeah, if they're from the far realm, it only makes sense. It could be Grandpapa.
Yeah. Oh, that's horrible to behold. What's even worse, though, is the one that you listed right after this, which was Mimic Lich.
Yes, because I'm a terrible person.
An undead Mimic Lich.
Yes.
That's just disturbing.
What's not to love?
Yeah, a lot of fun. These creatures are smart. Again, they are smart. In a dungeon, they can build traps, they can build false walls, they can build pits, and they can be at the bottom or the top of all of them.
Yeah.
Here's a couple of examples. You have a falling trap, right? We mentioned the spikes. The mimics are the spikes.
Sure.
Here's another one, a false wall. You open the false wall and the mimic's there. Or the mimic is the false wall.
You could even have the falling trap, but there's a ladder in there so that you can get out.
And that's the mimic.
You
could have, what is the one where the ceiling drops on top of you?
Yeah.
That's the mimic.
Yep.
They're 4,500 pounds.
Yes. And then it proceeds to eat you.
Yes.
Something else you can do is have them make alliances with other dungeon creatures. Maybe kobolds who trap humanoids and the mimics kill them.
And then they both eat them.
Sure.
They share the loot. They share the food. You could have them train oozes or carrion crawlers to subdue but not kill, and then all of them feed.
Sure. Maybe they cut deals with liches in exchange for food or items.
Or any powerful creature in a dungeon, for that matter.
Yeah.
Give them a culture. That's another fun upgrade.
Yes.
What would a mimic city or nation look like? We briefly lighted upon that, but imagine an entire city that mimics reside in, maybe even with other creatures. They don't have to be bad.
Right.
If they're fed, they could be very useful creatures.
You could have an entire city wall that's actually a mimic.
That would be an awesome lore build where this entire city has made a deal with a colony of mimics, and they are the wall, and any trespassers that try to get in after dark are eaten by the mimics, by the wall.
Yeah, criminals fed to the mimics.
Sure. Yeah. Boy, there's not going to be a lot of crime in that town, let me tell you.
Nope.
Getting fed to a wall kind of sucks.
You know how in the olden days they would cut off your hand? You just stick your hand in a hole and make...
Can you imagine a rogue that didn't know about the mimic wall and they're trying to climb? And they're like, wow, I'm really easy to stick to this wall.
Yeah,
It's so adhesive.
This wall is so easy to climb. These guys are suckers.
Then they plunge their hand into the wall and it bites off the hand.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. If it's a mimic city or a mimic nation, you can also consider their aspects in terms of other cultures and civilizations. Who would a mimic city or nation be at war at? What would be the end goal, right? Aside from world domination.
Right.
That's definitely a side quest right there, or a big bad.
Yeah. An entire mimic city that is the big bad for a game.
That would be awesome.
That could be a lot of fun. Let's talk about some story options, though.
And these are just a few examples, but these should whet your appetite. A stone carver sells amazingly lifelike statues that he claims feast on blood. They're just mimics.
Sure. He's just trained them.
He's befriended a bunch of mimics.
Yeah. A mimic cult of the hungering god is kidnapping and eating people.
That's simple enough. Short and sweet, right? Got a couple of big bads, a mimic god. What's more to like?
What do you have next here?
A wizard claims to have trained mimics to become whatever mount you need at the time in exchange for food.
I think it's hilarious. Like, he didn't train them. He just convinced them.
If you don't eat these passengers...
They will feed you over and over.
So if I become a horse, I just get fed? Yes.
If you become a griffin, they'll know to feed you meat.
Absolutely. Going on that same line...
A magical horseless carriage shows up at a mansion devoid of passengers.
Just a trail of blood drooling from the opening.
Sure.
People have been reported missing going down a specific alley in a town.
Going back to your wall mimic.
Yeah. I mean, it could be the wall. It could be the whole alley could be the mimic.
Yeah.
Could be the wall, the floor. Who knows? Could
Simple
be
manhole cover.
Is it the bum sitting in the corner there? If it can shapeshift into people?
A BBEG is replacing priceless artifacts with mimics. Or, depending on
How you're playing
how
it.
you're playing it, replacing people with mimics.
I love the idea of replacing treasures and priceless artifacts with mimics, and they keep missing the people that maintain the treasures.
Sure. Like just one of those like Keystone Cop kind of bumbling slapstick moments where no matter what, they can't seem to hit the guards.
Yeah. Their archivist comes in and just disappears. Where'd he go? And they see like just a shoe laying next to this priceless statue.
And the guards always survive, and they're just looking around like, what is going on here?
Here's one. A mimic acts as a jail cell door for a special political prisoner and potentially becomes their executioner.
You don't pick that lock, my friend.
No, sir.
A criminal organization regularly feeds a mimic in their base in exchange for it eliminating bodies.
You've got an assassin skill with a mimic that hangs out.
Sure. That person just disappeared.
I love this one. A funeral home is at a loss to explain a rash of missing bodies because the mimics are the coffins.
Yes.
Or the mausoleum.
Yep. Or depending on what type of world you're playing in, it could be like the morgue doors.
Oh, yeah.
Any of it, all of it, it's all great. Characters befriend a mimic by giving it treats.
Simple enough.
Yeah.
Now
Just a
you've
friendly
got
mimic.
Now you've got an awesome mimic, right? A mimic decides to ascend to the surface and live a peaceful life. What kind of side quest is that?
I don't know. I think he ends up a pirate, though.
He does. We actually have done this.
The owner of the bar, Hangry Howie's, is reported to have a bar that serves its customers. I mean, the bar's a mimic.
Yeah. Does it serve its customers or does it serve its customers?
Yes. Little column A, little column B. I'm just saying, pay your bar tab.
Yeah, if you pay that bar tab, you're going to be gone. A mysterious rowboat appears at the harbor with no clear owner. Every time it's claimed, owners go missing, and it reappears as if by magic. Again, we mentioned the mimic is the boat.
A rare metallic mimic guards the vault to the city's elite.
It's the big vault door.
Yes, it's the whole vault door.
That would be amazing. Additionally, a book mimic learns to become a wizard after being the protector of a mage's traveling spell book.
That's great. What's not to love?
It's intelligent.
Yes.
It becomes a wizard.
It sits there, it watches the wizard while the wizard's doing research. It watches the wizard while the wizard is practicing spells. It literally is an apprentice that the wizard just doesn't realize is apprenticing. A mimic is addicted to helium and often floats around laughing at others disguised as a large zeppelin.
Yes, it's a blimic.
Indeed.
The blimp mimic. And finally, a mimic has infiltrated one of the Ravnican guilds.
Yeah, it's a simic.
Ah, that's a dad joke right there. So there you have it. Several options to include mimics in your campaign, including the lore and some tactics behind it.
Some behavior, some upgrade options.
Oh yeah, lots of upgrade options, some monstrous powers, and for all else fails, a little bit of storytelling aspects that you can throw into your campaign to make mimics more interesting, versatile, and deadly.
And flavorful.
Absolutely, lots of flavor. Any questions or comments, hit us up at Goblin's Corner on Twitter or Mastodon. Did you enjoy this program? We've got more on the books.
I see what you did there, like the book mimic. Okay.
Yes. Subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player, YouTube, and Twitch.
Click the 5 stars and give us a review on iTunes and Podchaser. And on YouTube, hit the like and subscribe button, also the notification bell. It helps get our show in front of more people, and it feeds the hungry algorithm.
Which is currently growing pseudopods and shapeshifting and asking for some salt.
Sure, because literally the algorithm is a mimic.
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree with that. That's all the time we have for tonight. Once again, my name is Eric.
And I'm Matt.
We'll see you next time.
Good night, folks.
The Goblin's Corner is written and produced by Eric Holden and Matt Staples.
The music is by the Mighty D20.
This has been a Subterranean production.